I'm a big fan of TTRPGs. That includes Dungeons and Dragons. It was one of my earliest role-playing games to give it a try, and it's a game I still play today. It is one of the biggest, most common TTRPGs out there, and there's a lot of games, especially after, about a year or so ago, when there was some licensing issues, that decided to go ahead and make their own version of Dungeons and Dragons. This has been going on for years. A few years back, we saw a surge of OSR, or old school Renaissance, where people were going back to the old Dungeons and Dragons rules, taking things kind of back to square one, bringing some modernization into it usually, and now there are people making clones of the current state of Dungeons and Dragons. These current clones, I believe that's the term we're going with, but we have games out there like Pathfinder, Tales of the Valiant. I've talked about Level Up Advanced 5e before, but one I just came across recently is MythCraft. And this is a game that started in 2023. It was kickstarted. It had a $30,000 goal and surpassed that goal at $125,000 to go ahead and publish. They put out a player's book, a core book. They put out a guidebook, the equivalent to a GM guide or a DMG. They went ahead as well and put out a creature codex, or, monster manual or bestiary. This book only came across my feed recently, though, and that's because they're doing another Kickstarter to kind of relaunch an expanded or enhanced version of the game. It does use the same D20 base rules that we see in other games that I just mentioned, Pathfinder, Tales of the Valiant. But it does do a few things differently, some of which I find very interesting. Action economy has long been a staple of tabletop role-playing games and wargaming, and this talks about how many moves somebody can make, what's the most efficient way to get the most done in a combat turn. This became more prevalent when Pathfinder 2nd Edition came out, and instead of mirroring the Dungeons & Dragons attack, bonus action, free action, they came out with an action point economy where you get 3 action points, and you can spend those points however you want. This allows characters of different classes to do things in a turn that you would need special class abilities to do in a single turn in Dungeons & Dragons. MythCraft takes that one step further. They give you action points, however, you start with a base number, but you can build up that number of action points. The way they do it, they have some different attributes than we're used to. One of those attributes is a special attribute called coordination, which by putting points into that, you can get more action points, which I think is a kind of neat idea. So not everyone's just got 2 or 3 action or action points they can take per turn. This takes me back to the days of Palladium, where taking certain skills and certain hand-to-hand combats or certain weapon talents or training, I could have a character that could attack more in a round. And I like that ability. I like that concept that you can specialize and build a character that can move more or do more in a single turn than other characters. It is a trade-off. You're not spending points on other things. You're not necessarily hitting harder or more precise, but you're hitting more often. It's a trade-off. It is an opportunity cost. The other thing about it is how they spend their action points. You can actually bank action points to take larger or more actions on the next turn, and how they worked it out is pretty nice. It does add a level of complexity that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but for those who really enjoy getting into the tactical gaming side of things on a grid and a battle map, this is something you might want to look into. Another thing they did is classes, and you could almost look at MythCraft as a near classless 5th edition game. The reason is they took a lot of the class abilities, they took a lot of the feats, and they put them instead as talents. They do, however, have classes, and I'd be remiss to say that it's classless, because it's not. They do. And you get a certain number of talents every time you level up. And you can then decide to take talents from that would normally go to a cleric, and you can work through a talent tree, or you could skip over from that and take talents that might normally belong to a rogue and go down that tree. And you could mix and match and work your way through trees. Later talents always having precursor requirement talents. Interestingly enough, you don't even choose your class until 2nd level at the earliest. And choosing the class does give you certain class abilities or access to certain class talents that you otherwise wouldn't be able to choose. One thing that all characters do get at the beginning level, rather than a class, at first level you're going to have a background, and you can choose a profession. In some cases, you can choose more than one profession. And these kind of help guide and build your character out at that first level. Overall, I really like the feeling, and I like the customization abilities. I like how they're doing the action points, and I also like how they do the level ups. So you get stuff at every level. If you do choose a class, you are not leveling up your class every level. That only levels up every so often. Something else they do that I really like, that Pathfinder also does, that 5th edition had promised to do but did not, was make the race, in this case lineage abilities, level up over time. You get additional talents because of your lineage as you gain levels. So a lot of cool options are there. They may work to move to another D20 base game like Pathfinder, Tales of the Valiant, Level Up Advanced 5e, or even the original Dungeons & Dragons. They have a really cool license for anyone who wants to create for the game, create their own stuff using their rules. I highly recommend, if you were a fan of the D20 base system, but you think that it could use some tweaks, you think there's some different or better ways to do things, take a look at MythCraft by Quasi-Real Publishing. Until I see you again, remember to be well, be safe, and be awesome, both to yourself and one another.